Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're exploring a fascinating hidden war that happens all around us every single day. You know, for over a century, humanity has relied on extreme heat to protect our food, our air, and our medicine from microscopic threats. We're talking about the destructive power of fire from a Bunsen burner or the intense pressurized steam of an autoclave. Heat is a fantastic, reliable weapon. But here's the massive, unavoidable problem. What happens when the very thing you're trying to protect would simply melt, burn, or lose all of its medical value if you heated it up? Today we're going to look at the ingenious, invisible shields we use to control microbes without striking a single match or relying on extreme heat.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to look at 5 distinct weapons in our heat-free microbial control arsenal. We'll start with the heat limit, then move through mechanical traps, light disruptors, deep penetrators, and finally, environmental delayers. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the heat limit. So this brings us to the fundamental challenge we face in modern science and medicine. Heat is incredibly effective at killing bacteria and viruses, right? But it's also entirely indiscriminate. It's kind of like a blunt instrument that destroys sensitive materials just as easily as it destroys pathogens. Think about this for a second. How do you sterilize something that melts? We rely on a vast array of vital, everyday items that simply cannot survive an autoclave. Think of the thin plastic syringes used in hospitals, vital hormones, sensitive antibiotic liquids, or even the liquid vitamins you might take in the morning. If you subject any of these complex molecular structures to extreme heat, they are completely destroyed. They become totally useless. We desperately need an alternative.
And that brings us to a foundational concept for today: heat-free control. We're talking about physical and mechanical methods brilliantly designed to eliminate or inhibit microbes without relying on destructive high temperatures. Think of this as our toolkit of ingenious alternatives to boiling and baking. Instead of just burning everything to the ground, we're using physics, energy, and clever environmental manipulation to keep our modern world sterile and safe.
Moving right along to Section 2, the mechanical trap. So if we can't burn the microbes away, our very first heat-free tool is to simply physically block them. This is the principle of filtration, and what we're looking at here brilliantly illustrates exactly how that mechanical block works. Imagine a microscopic bouncer at the door of a club. When a bacteria-laden liquid is poured into a filter apparatus, a vacuum pump creates a downward suction. That suction pulls the fluid through incredibly tiny pores in a filter. Now, the bacterial cells, like E. coli for instance, are physically larger than those pores. Because they literally cannot fit through, they become permanently trapped on top, while the perfectly decontaminated or even fully sterilized liquid just drips safely into the receiving flask below. It's basically a simple physical traffic jam.
Now, the concept of a strainer obviously isn't new, but the technology behind it has evolved into a fascinating scientific arms race. Back in the 1890s, as interest in these mysterious, invisible viruses was really growing, scientists realized they needed a way to separate these incredibly tiny viruses from larger bacteria. Charles Chamberlain, an associate of the legendary Louis Pasteur, pioneered a dense porcelain filter for this exact purpose. Then Julius Petrie, the very same scientist who gave us the Petri dish, developed a sand filter. Over the decades, the technology just kept escalating. We saw inorganic filters made of finely ground glass and organic filters using diatomaceous earth, which naturally attracts the organic components of microorganisms. Today, the technology is so precise that microbiologists use advanced membrane filters made of cellulose acetate or polycarbonate. These are so tightly calibrated that scientists can actually capture live bacterial cells on the surface and grow them into countable colonies right on the filter pad.
But hey, this isn't just about laboratory liquids. It's about the air we breathe in high-stakes environments. We filter out airborne threats using HEPA filters. High-efficiency particulate air filters aren't just simple nets, they're essentially an impenetrable microscopic maze. By forcing air through this tangled web of fibers, they can remove over 99% of all particles, including microbes, that have a diameter larger than 0.3 micrometers. To put that into perspective, this is absolute critical technology. Without HEPA filters, purifying the air in surgical units, hospital burn wards, and pharmaceutical filling rooms would be totally impossible.
All right, Section 3, the light disruptor. Now we're moving from physical barriers to energy-based weapons. Our second heat-free tool is ultraviolet light, which acts as a powerful, entirely invisible surface-level assassin. Within the electromagnetic spectrum, ultraviolet light is a type of radiant energy sitting right outside our visible range. It generally operates on a wavelength between 100 and 400 nanometers, but to actually destroy a pathogen, you need total precision. There is an absolute sweet spot, a bactericidal zone, where the energy is most destructive to bacterial cells, and that sits perfectly at about 265 nanometers. So you might be wondering, how exactly does shining a light kill a microbe? Well, it doesn't burn them. It actually triggers a precise four-step mechanism of genetic sabotage. First, the bacterial cellular DNA absorbs that highly specific radiant energy. Second, this energy literally forces adjacent thymine molecules in the DNA sequence to unnaturally link together. Think of it like chemically melting the teeth of a zipper so it can no longer open or close. Because of this massive structural distortion, the organism can no longer encode messenger RNA properly. Protein synthesis is completely halted, and chromosome replication becomes impossible. Unable to produce critical proteins or reproduce, the damaged organism just quickly and quietly dies.
But every weapon has a weakness, and the major limitation of the light disruptor is that it is strictly a surface-level tool. UV light simply lacks the energy to penetrate deeply into liquids or solids. Furthermore, because of how it scrambles DNA, it causes significant, dangerous damage to human skin cells. So while it's absolutely fantastic for limiting airborne and surface contamination in places like morgues, pharmacies, hospital rooms, and public toilet facilities, it won't do you any good if the bacteria are hiding inside a solid object or suspended deep within a liquid pharmaceutical. Let's move along and see how this builds into our next solution.
Which brings us to Section 4, the deep penetrator.
Because UV light is stopped by mere surfaces, we needed a tool that could reach deeper. Enter ionizing radiation. Now, what's really interesting here is how perfectly this contrasts these two energies. UV light operates with a relatively longer wavelength, it directly sabotages DNA, but it's easily blocked. By contrast, X-rays and gamma rays possess much shorter, incredibly powerful wavelengths. As these intense rays pass right through microbial molecules, they are so energetic they literally knock electrons right out of their orbital shells, creating ions. These unstable ions then rapidly combine with cellular water to generate highly reactive free radicals. These free radicals act like microscopic shrapnel, completely wrecking the cell's metabolism and physiology from the inside out. But the absolute game changer here is that this intense radiation penetrates deeply. This allows us to fully sterilize thick plastics, medical sutures, and sensitive liquid pharmaceuticals like hormones right through their final sealed packaging.
And guess what? You likely interact with this deep penetration technology at the grocery store without even realizing it. Food irradiation is used on an industrial scale and has a surprisingly long history. It was first utilized way back in 1921 to inactivate the agent that causes trichinolysis in meat. Decades later, as the technology matured, the U.S. FDA formally approved it to preserve poultry in the early 1990s, and then extended that approval to red meats like beef, lamb, and pork in 1997. Today, these highly calibrated pasteurizing doses of radiation are utilized across 40 different countries for more than 100 food items. It's even the exact technology used to safely prepare shelf-stable meals for the U.S. military and American astronauts in space.
Now, it is important to objectively note that this specific method exists within an ongoing public tension. On one side, there are the clear regulatory safety approvals from government bodies like the FDA, which validate that these pasteurizing doses effectively eliminate dangerous pathogens and prolong shelf life without fully sterilizing or altering the nutritional value of the food. On the other side, however, there is significant, organized pushback from consumer activist groups. Their stated concerns focus heavily on the potential long-term safety implications for the factory workers operating the radiation facilities, as well as the end consumers regularly eating the irradiated products.
Okay, before we completely leave the fascinating topic of radiation and energy, I have a quick, everyday myth-busting question for you. Think about that appliance sitting right now in your kitchen. Do microwaves actually kill bacteria?
The answer is no. Well, not directly anyway. Microwaves have a wavelength that is significantly longer than both UV light and visible light. Because of this, they do not possess any specific microbicidal activity at all. All a microwave oven actually does is cause water molecules inside the food to absorb energy and go into rapid, high-speed motion. Think about rubbing your hands together really fast on a cold day. The resulting friction creates heat, right? A microwave does that to water molecules on a massive scale, and that friction heat is transferred to the food. So, while the resulting heat generated inside the food might eventually kill microbes, the microwaves themselves are not a specific heat-free destructive force.
Finally, Section 5, the delayers.
We've talked extensively about trapping microbes in mechanical nets and scrambling their DNA with energy, but what if we just press pause on their life cycle? This brings us to physical methods of preservation, primarily dehydration and cold temperatures.
Now, these methods don't actually sterilize a product. They simply retard spoilage. By dropping the temperature into the freezing zone or pulling the moisture out of the environment, we are drastically slowing down microbial growth. We are prolonging the shelf life of everyday items like cured meats, dried fish, and breakfast cereals by simply depriving the microorganisms of the basic environmental conditions they absolutely require to multiply and survive. So, the crucial point here is perfectly captured in this profound principle straight from our source material. Because water is necessary for life, it follows that where there is no water, there is virtually no life. Honestly, many of the incredibly simple dried foods sitting right now in your kitchen pantry typify this exact ancient yet highly effective scientific principle. Which brings us to the end of our journey today. The microscopic world is absolutely full of threats, but as we've seen, human ingenuity has developed an incredible, multi-layered array of tools to fight back, all without striking a single match. So the next time you drink a glass of filtered water, take a daily vitamin, or even just pour milk over a simple bowl of dried cereal, ask yourself, which invisible, heat-free shield kept you safe today? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me, and keep questioning the incredible science hidden right inside your everyday life.